Imagine stepping out for a short walk and never coming home. No struggle, no goodbye. Just gone. That same vanishing act has played out on planes, in crowded streets, and in cities under constant surveillance. Each case leaves behind fragments. A car, a shoe, a phone still ringing but never an answer. This is the Unsolved Disappearances Iceberg. Tier 1. Amelia Earhart. This is Amelia Earhart, standing next to her shiny Lockheed Electra. She's a legend in the aviation world, the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic. But on July 2, 1937, she went bigger, flying around the whole world. She's got her buddy Fred Noonan riding along, and they take off from some little spot in New Guinea. The plan is to land on this tiny island called Howland in the middle of the Pacific. No big deal, right? But here's where it goes bad. The weather turned tough, their radios kept cutting out, and the Pacific, well, the Pacific is huge. At one point, Amelia's voice came through, saying she was running north and south. Basically, she was low on fuel and had no idea where land was. The Coast Guard tried to guide her in, but their signals kept missing each other. And then, silence. The world lost its mind. The Navy and Coast Guard launched one of the biggest searches ever. Planes, ships, anything they could use. They swept miles of ocean, even tiny islands, hoping for wreckage. But there was nothing. After 2 years, they declared her gone. Likely crashed at sea. But people never stopped looking. In 1940, bones and a woman's shoe showed up on a deserted island called Nikumaroro, along with a jar of old freckle cream. The thing is, Amelia was known for her freckles. Scientists said the bones matched her size too, but without DNA, it's still just a maybe. Others swear she ended up in Japanese territory, captured as a spy, maybe even executed. But the photo got debunked, and nobody ever found a scrap of her or Fred in any Japanese records. Most experts stick with the crash and sink theory, but until somebody finds that plane or some real evidence, it's still wide open. But at least Amelia still has some theories that kinda make sense. I've got another missing plane story. One that's way more famous and way more mysterious than Amelia's. MH370. On March 8, 2014, Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 took off from Kuala Lumpur headed for Beijing. It was supposed to be a regular overnight flight with 239 people on board, but about 40 minutes in, everything went sideways. The plane's transponder and radios suddenly shut down, which meant civilian radar lost it completely. The military picked up a faint signal for a while, and they saw the jet pull a sharp U-turn, swing back over Malaysia, then head west across the Malacca Strait. So now it wasn't just a technical glitch. Someone had changed the plane's course. After that, the trail went cold. But 6 hours of faint satellite pings suggested the plane kept flying south until it ran out of fuel. That's why investigators said it probably ended up deep in the Indian Ocean, far from anywhere safe to land. The disappearance sparked the most iconic aviation search ever. At first, crews scoured the South China Sea, because that was the original route. But when the satellite data came in, the whole operation shifted thousands of miles west. For 3 years, ships and planes searched an area bigger than Pennsylvania. Still nothing. Then in 2015, there was hope. A wing piece called a flaperon washed up on Reunion Island. The serial number matched MH370, so it confirmed the plane had gone down in the ocean. Over the next year, more pieces appeared in Africa carried by currents, but the main wreck is still missing. So what happened? Well, pick your theory. The most popular idea is pilot suicide. Some investigators think the captain planned it. He had flight simulator at home, and apparently, he'd practiced a weird route into the southern Indian Ocean that matches what happened. It could be a hijacking. 2 people on board had stolen passports, but that led nowhere. They were just trying to get to Europe, and no terrorist group ever claimed responsibility. Then there's the ghost plane theory. Something happened on board. A sudden loss of cabin pressure or a fire. The crew turns the plane around, trying to save everyone, but ends up passing out. The plane just keeps going on autopilot till it runs out of gas. That fits some of the evidence, but it doesn't explain the deliberate course changes or why the communication systems were switched off. Plus, no distress call ever came through. And of course, the internet is full of conspiracy theories. Aliens, cyber hijacking, or even that it was shot down by accident. But the evidence doesn't back any of that up. All the real clues point to a crash in the Indian Ocean. So now we've covered 2 cases of missing planes, but I've got another one. The twist this time is it's not the plane that vanished, it's one of the passengers. Dan Cooper. The day before Thanksgiving, 1971, a man in a suit walks up to the counter in Portland, buys a one-way ticket to Seattle under the name Dan Cooper, and boards with nothing but a briefcase. Just a normal business traveler. Halfway through the short flight, he hands a note to a flight attendant. There's a bomb in his case. He wants $200,000 in cash and 4 parachutes. Just like that, a regular commuter hop turns into a hijacking. What throws everyone off is how calm he is. He's polite. He tells the crew exactly what to do. The plane circles Seattle while the FBI scrambles. When they finally land, Cooper trades 36 passengers for the ransom and parachutes. But he isn't done. He orders the pilots to take off again, heading south at low altitude, with the rear stairs unlocked. And then, on a stormy night over the forests of Washington, Cooper opened the stairs and jumped into the dark with the cash strapped to his body. Just like that, he disappeared. Except, back then, the FBI panicked. They called the case Norjack and launched one of the biggest manhunts in U.S. history. Over 800 suspects are interviewed. Cooper left almost nothing behind except just a clip-on tie. Investigators even tried DNA years later, but nothing matched. But then, in 1980, a kid digging on a sandbar next to the Columbia River finds a bundle of old $20 bills, waterlogged and half-buried. Turns out they matched the serial numbers from Cooper's ransom, but it's the only Cooper cash ever found. The spot is called Tenna Bar, and about 20 miles downstream from where he probably jumped. How did it get there? Nobody agrees. Either it dropped out during the jump, maybe it floated down later, or it was planted. But after that, nothing else is turned up. By 2016, after decades with no answers, the FBI just packs it in and closes the case. To them, it's a cold case. End of story. But you know how it goes. People just won't let this one die. The most famous suspect is Richard Floyd McCoy Jr. He was an army guy who pulled off almost the exact same skyjacking a year later. Parachute and everything. He was caught, jailed, and killed in a shootout. But his own kids have come forward saying they found an old parachute on his property. The FBI checked it out again as recently as 2024. But there's still no proof McCoy was Cooper. There's even guys who confessed on their deathbeds like Dwayne Weber. But nothing ever matches up. At this point, Cooper is less of a suspect and more of a myth. Or maybe Dan Cooper was just an Asgardian who lost a dare to his brother. The missing 3 kids. On Australia Day, January 26, 1966, Jane, Arna, and Grant Beaumont asked their mother for some pocket money to catch the bus to Glen Elk Beach. It was only a few kilometers away, and the kids had made the trip many times before, but this time, they never came back. At first, their parents, Jim and Nancy, thought it was a mix-up. Maybe the kids missed the bus or they stayed out too long. But as the hours went on, fear replaced hope. The police were called, and by nightfall, Adelaide was in a state of panic. Witnesses had seen the Beaumont kids at the beach, laughing, buying meat pies with a 1-pound note that was suspicious since it was more money than their mom said she gave them, and most unsettling of all, spending time with a tall, athletic man. What disturbed people was how comfortable they seemed around him. Jane, who was usually super cautious, was seen chatting and playing with this stranger. That detail haunted everyone. Had they just met him that day, or had he been around before? After around 12 p.m., the trail is gone. Some swore they saw the kids walk hand in hand away from the beach. Others said they spotted him with the same man, but no one ever saw them again. The search that followed was massive. Police dragged ponds, searched drains, and interviewed anyone who might have known something, but nothing. Leads poured in from across the country, but they were false or just mean hoaxes. Even psychics got involved. They convinced the cops to dig up a factory floor in 1967, but still nothing. Over the years, there were many suspects, convicted killers, people with predatory histories, even wealthy locals like Harry Phipps, whose own son claimed the Beaumont kids had been at their house. But every dig, every clue ended in disappointment. Jim and Nancy spent their lives searching. They died never knowing what happened to their children, and the case, like so many others, slipped into part tragedy and part ghost story. And you know, they weren't the only ones caught in something like this. In Tier 5, I've got another entry about a group of kids who vanished, but this time, right in the middle of a house fire. But before we get there, let's go back to Tier 2 first. Tier 2, Brandon Swanson. It's the middle of the night in May 14, 2008. Brandon Swanson, a 19-year-old college kid from Minnesota, is driving home after a party. Nothing unusual, until his car slips off a gravel road and drops into a ditch. Fortunately, he wasn't hurt, and he called his parents for help. Brandon thinks he's close to the town of Lind, which is just a few minutes from home. So his mom and dad get in their car and they stay on the phone with him the whole time. He's flashing his headlights, describing what he sees, but no matter where they look, they can't find him. It goes on like this for nearly an hour. At one point, Brandon spots distant lights and says he's going to walk toward them, thinking it must be a town. He leaves the car, still on the phone, describing fences, fields, and rough ground as he goes. Then, around 2:30 a.m., he suddenly says, "Oh shit," and the line goes dead. His parents kept calling him over and over. The phone rings, but nobody ever picks up. By morning, still no sign of Brandon. Finally, police joined the search. At first, they assume he just went to a friend's place, but his parents insist something's wrong. When they find his car, it isn't anywhere near Lind. It's outside Taunton, about 25 miles away from where Brandon thought he was. The car is intact, no damage and no missing items. Police released bloodhounds to track his scent. They followed the trail through fields all the way to the Yellow Medicine River, and then the trail stops, right at the water. Naturally, people think maybe he slipped and fell in. Maybe the last thing he said was him losing his footing on the bank. They search the river, drag it, walk the banks, but they never find a thing. Maybe he made it out and wandered off, only to collapse in the dark, hidden in some overgrown field. But after all these years, with all the searching, Brandon has never been found. Maura Murray. Maura Murray was a 21-year-old nursing student from Massachusetts who, on the night of February 9, 2004, simply disappeared. It began earlier that day with strange behavior. She emailed her professors and her boss saying she needed a week off for a family emergency, but there hadn't been one, and her family had no idea why she lied. She packed her car with clothes, textbooks, and some personal items, emptied most of her bank account at an ATM, and bought a stack of alcohol at a local store. Where she was going, nobody knew. Around 7:30 that night, her car crashed on a rural road in Haverhill, New Hampshire. There was heavy snow and nothing around. A neighbor heard the thud and called 911. A school bus driver named Butch Atwood stopped to check on her. She looked shaken, with a small injury, but nothing serious. Butch offered to call the police. Maura said she already called for a tow. But the problem was, cell service was basically non-existent out there. Butch drove home and called the police from his landline phone anyway. When police arrived 15 minutes later, Maura was gone. Her car was locked and facing the wrong way. Her phone, credit cards, and bank cards are all missing and never used again. Search teams combed the woods and roads. Dogs picked up her scent for a short distance before it vanished. There were no footprints and no clues. So what are the theories? Some think she ran to avoid the trouble from the crash, only to freeze in the New Hampshire winter. But no body was ever found. Others believe she flagged down a passing car, but found the wrong one. And then there's the theory she staged it all. She was running from her life on purpose. 2 decades later, it's still a mystery. Lart Mittank. In the summer of 2014, 28-year-old Lart Mittank took a budget vacation with friends to Golden Sands, Bulgaria. It was supposed to be cheap drinks, sun, and soccer talk. And it was, until a fight broke out over a debate over soccer teams. Lars got punched, left with a ruptured eardrum, and a doctor told him not to fly yet. Take some antibiotics, rest, wait it out. So his friends flew home, and Lars stayed behind. But that's when things turned strange. From his hotel, he began calling his mother in Germany, whispering like someone was listening. He told her there were men following him, begged her to cancel his credit cards, and sent texts asking if his medicine could be messing with his head. For the record, the antibiotic he was prescribed isn't known to cause paranoia. On July 8, Lars headed for Varna Airport with a ticket home. He seemed uneasy but functional. He even stopped by the airport doctor's office, probably for a final check. Then he suddenly snapped. Surveillance footage shows Lars suddenly bolting from the exam room. He left behind his bag, passport, even his phone, and sprinted out the terminal. He ran through the parking lot, over a fence, and into a field. And that was the last confirmed sighting of him. Police searched the airport grounds but found nothing. On the cameras, nobody was chasing him. The witnesses remembered him muttering about being followed. There are 2 theories. Some doctors think it was sudden psychosis, caused by stress, injury, and isolation. Others think his paranoia wasn't imagined, that maybe he recognized someone from the fight and panicked. There have been supposed sightings of Lars as homeless guys in Brazil or Eastern Europe, but none of these leads have ever been confirmed. Years later, Lars's mother still posts appeals and replays the airport footage. The case remains open, but no answers have ever come. Asha Degree. This one's haunting. On Valentine's Day, 2000, 9-year-old Asha Degree slipped out of her family's home in New Shelby, North Carolina, in the middle of a night storm. There were no signs of trouble at home. Her parents were strict but loving, and Asha was shy, the type of kid who played it safe. But sometime after going to bed around 8 p.m., she quietly left the house, taking her book bag with her. At 2:30 a.m., her dad checked in and she was asleep. By 6:30, when her mom went to wake her, the bed was empty and the front door was unlocked. Neighbors later reported something unsettling. Around 4 a.m., drivers on Highway 18 saw a small girl walking alone in the rain, wearing a backpack. One driver even turned around to check, but the girl ran into the woods. That was the last confirmed sighting of Asha. By sunrise, the search was massive. Volunteers combed the fields and woods. In a nearby shed, they found candy wrappers, a pencil, and a yellow hair bow her mom recognized. It looked like Asha had rested there briefly before moving on. For over a year, nothing. Then in 2001, a construction worker found her backpack, double wrapped in plastic and buried 26 miles away. Inside were her school supplies and a t-shirt no one in the family recognized. Whoever put it there clearly meant to hide it. Cops and the FBI investigated every angle. They looked into whether a book she read inspired her to sneak out for a secret journey. Then they considered if she was running away from home for reasons nobody could pin down. And they also explored the possibility that a driver hit her on the highway and, in a panic, hid her body to cover it up. So what's the most likely answer? She walked away by herself. Somebody out there took her. In 2016, the FBI got a tip about a dark green 1970s Lincoln Continental or Ford Thunderbird. That car possibly picked up Asha along the highway. Still, nobody's been charged, and there's been no real breakthrough. The man who walked into a bar and never walked out. This one feels impossible. Brian Schaffer was a 27-year-old med student at Ohio State with a girlfriend, graduation coming, and a vacation planned in Miami. Then, on the night of March 31, 2006, he vanished inside a college bar. Brian started the night with dinner, then bar hopped with friends down High Street. Around 2 a.m., they ended up at a place called the Ugly Tuna Saloon. Cameras caught Brian outside at 1:55, talking to two women, then heading back inside. And that's it. His friends lost track of him after that. When the bar closed, they waited by the exit. Brian never came out. Police reviewed the security footage frame by frame. Every single person who walked out the front entrance was accounted for, except Brian. He's seen walking in. He's never seen leaving. The only other exit was a service door near the kitchen that led into a construction zone. But it wasn't meant for customers. If Brian went that way, he would have stepped into a dark, unsafe work site, and nothing ever turned up there either. His phone went dead. His credit cards untouched. His car sat at his apartment. He missed his Miami trip. Soon, the police searched everything. The bar, rooftops, dumpsters, even storm drains. Even after cadaver dogs swept the area, still nothing. It was like the building swallowed him. This is where the theories start flying. One idea is that he avoided and ducked into the construction area, got hurt, and his body buried under the building. But that part of the building got searched top to bottom, and there's still nothing to show for it. There's also the wrong place, wrong time theory. Maybe he left the bar out the back, wandered into trouble, and was hurt or killed nearby. But again, no evidence and signs of a struggle. The Ugly Tuna has changed names since, but the mystery never left. A man walked into a bar. Somehow, he never walked out. Now, if Brian Schaffer's disappearance feels impossible, I have one entry in Tier 4 that seems to bend reality even further. Because the man at the center doesn't just vanish. He came back to a place hundreds of miles away with no memory. Tier 3. 3 women gone with no trace. It was June 7, 1992, in Springfield, Missouri. 2 best friends, Susie Streeter and Stacy McCall, had just graduated high school. They spent the night party hopping, celebrating the start of the summer. And by 2 a.m., they headed back to Susie's house. Her mom, Cheryl Levitt, was already home. The plan was simple. Crash for the night, meet up with friends in the morning, and move on with life. By daylight, all 3 were gone. Their cars were still in the driveway. Their purses, money, clothes were untouched. Susie's graduation cake was still untouched on the counter. The only odd details were a broken porch light, a cigarette left in an ashtray, the front door unlocked, and the family dog acting nervous. The first people to notice weren't police, but friends. They came over, saw the mess, and started cleaning the mess, like sweeping up glass and tidying up the counters without realizing they were trampling through a potential crime scene. By the time officers arrived, any real evidence might have been erased. Searches began immediately. Police scoured the neighborhood, the woods, followed hundreds of tips, but nothing. At some point that morning, one of their friends got a strange, obscene phone call. She thought it was a prank and deleted it. To this day, nobody knows if it was connected. Here come the theories. Most likely, someone either followed the girls home from the party or someone they knew showed up at the door. The stranger could have tricked them into opening up. If it was someone familiar, nobody was worried until things went sideways. There was talk of a creepy green van spotted nearby, but police never tracked it down. Some even think the women witnessed something illegal and paid the price. Years later, a felon, Robert Craig Cox, claimed he knew the truth, that the women were dead and their bodies were never to be found. He refused to say more. In 2007, radar scans under a local parking garage showed suspicious spots similar to 3 graves, but the police said it wasn't enough to commence a dig. Branson Perry. Branson Perry lived with his dad in the small farm town of Skidmore, Missouri. On April 11, 2001, it was just a normal Wednesday. His dad was coming home from the hospital, so Branson spent the day cleaning the house and yard. A female friend was there helping, and 2 guys were outside working on his car. At some point that afternoon, Branson said he was going to put a pair of jumper cables back in the shed, so he walked outside, and that was the last time anyone ever saw him. After minutes passed and he didn't return, his friends started looking for him. There was no note or sign he left on purpose. His wallet, car keys, and van were still there. At first, people thought maybe he went off with a buddy, but the next day, when he hadn't come home, they panicked. Police searched everywhere, the house, the shed, the yard, but no tracks, no blood, and no struggle. The strangest part is the jumper cables weren't in the shed that day. 2 weeks later, Branson's dad suddenly found them sitting right where they were supposed to be, as if someone had quietly returned them. Did Branson never make it there, or did someone put them back later to throw people off? Everyone was questioned. The friend, the mechanic, nobody admitted to seeing anything unusual. Police floated the idea Branson left on his own, but that didn't add up. His money and car were untouched, and he wasn't in trouble, at least not publicly. Years later, investigators uncovered a disturbing lead. A man named Jack Wayne Rogers was arrested on unrelated charges. On his computer, they found posts describing the abduction and killing of a young blonde man, and the details eerily close to Branson's case. Rogers denied it, and no evidence tied him directly. Branson's mom fought to find him until the day she died. The case is wide open, and the Perry family is still waiting for someone, anyone, to come forward. Emanuela Orlandi. This isn't your average missing person story. Emanuela Orlandi was 15, the daughter of a Vatican employee, and lived inside the Vatican, the world's smallest country. On June 22, 1983, she left her family's apartment for a music lesson in Rome. That evening, she called her sister from a payphone, mentioning a guy who'd offered her a job handing out flyers for Avon Cosmetics at a fashion show. That was the last anyone ever heard from her. When she didn't come home, her family called the Vatican police, and by midnight, the Italian authorities were involved. With the Vatican's name attached, the case exploded. But instead of answers, the family kept hitting dead ends. Soon after, a man calling himself the American started phoning reporters and the Orlandis. He claimed Emanuela was alive and being held to trade for Mehmet Ali Agca, the Turkish gunman who tried to assassinate Pope John Paul II in 1981. He sent her student ID to a news agency as proof. Because of this, the Pope himself went on TV asking for her safe return. But nothing came of it. Most now think it was a cruel hoax. Here are the theories. One said she was kidnapped as leverage to free Agca, but even Agca himself called that idea ridiculous after his release. Another pointed to Rome's Banda della Maliana crime gang, claiming they took Emanuela to pressure the Vatican over millions in missing mob loans. The strangest twist from this was that their boss, Enrico de Pedis, was buried in a prestigious church crypt like royalty. In 2012, his tomb was opened after a tip that Emanuela was inside. It was empty. Then there's the Vatican conspiracy itself. Some think she was silenced to cover up an abuse. A friend later claimed she'd been harassed by a senior cleric. A 2017 unverified document, allegedly from the Vatican, hinted they paid to relocate her or cover up the case. The church denied it, calling the papers fake. But still, no backpack, remains, or solid evidence. Even when 2 Vatican tombs were opened in 2019, they were empty. America's own Dyatlov Pass. In February 1978, 5 friends from Yuba City, California, Ted Weiler, Bill Sterling, Jack Madruga, Jack Hewitt, and Gary Mathias went into a car to catch a college baseball game in Chico. Most had mild intellectual disabilities or mental health conditions, but they lived normal lives. They were the kind of guys who stuck to routines, never stayed out late, and always checked in with their families. That night, they never came home. 4 days later, police found their car, not on the road back from Chico, but abandoned on a snowy mountain road near Plumas National Forest, miles into the wilderness. It wasn't badly stuck. The keys were missing, but the gas tank was a quarter full. The inside were game programs and candy wrappers, like they just step out for a moment. Why drive into the woods in light jackets and sneakers when they had their own Special Olympics basketball tournament the next morning? That's the first mystery. Months later, spring season revealed the disturbing truth. Ted Wire was found inside a Forest Service trailer almost 20 miles from the car. He'd wrapped himself in blankets but starved by weeks or even months. The confusing part was the trailer was stocked with food and a propane heater, but none of it was used. Over the next few weeks, the searchers found more remains. Jack Madruga and Bill Sturzend were discovered 11.4 miles from the car, likely having died from the cold while trying to hike out. Their bodies had been scavenged by animals. The third one was Jackie Hewitt's. His bones turned up not far from the trailer. But Gary Mathias, arguably the most street smart of the group, was never found at all. Only his shoes were left in the trailer, suggesting he'd worn Ted's boots and tried to go for help. He was never seen again. There are plenty of theories. Did they take a wrong turn and get lost? Maybe, but Madruga was a careful driver, and his family swears he'd never willingly go up that road. Did someone lure them or force them up there? There was a witness who said he saw 2 cars stopped on the mountain road that night, with people and maybe even a crying baby outside. Did Mathias, who had schizophrenia, freak out and convince his friends to leave the car and hike deeper into the forest? Or was it something more sinister? The problem is, there's no evidence for that either. No signs of a struggle. No obvious injuries from an attack. No one can explain why they didn't do more to save themselves, or why they split up in the first place. Decades later, the Yuba County 5 case is still unsolved. Their families were left with nothing but heartache and confusion. Tier 4. Disappeared in the Lake Michigan Triangle and reappeared. Some missing person cases are tragic. This one is just weird. In February 1978, a college student named Stephen Kubacki went skiing near Lake Michigan. He set out alone, just him and his gear. The next day, he was gone. Searchers find his skis and backpack abandoned right on the frozen lake. There's a single set of footprints leading out onto the ice, and then the trail just ends. The only thing beyond was open water. Naturally, everyone assumed he fell in and drowned. His family mourned. Life moved on. 15 months later, Stephen showed up alive. He woke up in a field in Massachusetts, 700 miles from Lake Michigan, wearing clothes that weren't his, carrying a small bag with random items he didn't recognize. He had no idea where he'd been. The last thing he remembered was stepping onto the ice. Suddenly, it was May 1979, and his life was supposed to be over. A passing driver picked him up, and then he called his parents. Imagine that phone call. "Hey, Mom, it's me. No, I'm not dead. I just don't know where I've been." He even had a Wisconsin Marathon t-shirt and maps, like he'd been traveling. He joked later that he felt like he'd been running a lot. The story hit newspapers, then faded when Stephen refused interviews. For decades, it was just another Lake Michigan Triangle tale, an area already tied to vanishing ships, planes, and UFO stories. The more grounded explanation is dissociative fugue, a rare psychological state where you lose your identity, wander, live, and later forget it all. Stephen eventually earned a PhD and has hinted he remembers more, talking about strange encounters, spiritual experiences, maybe even hallucinogens, but he hasn't told the full story. Until he does, all we know is this: Stephen Kubacki walked off into the snow, vanished, and came back with a year of his life erased. Tara Calico. On the morning of September 20, 1988, the 19-year-old Tara Calico said goodbye to her mom, grabbed her Walkman, and rode off in her pink bike down State Road 47 in New Mexico. She told her mom to come get her if she wasn't back by noon because she had a tennis game later. It should have been an ordinary morning, but Tara never came home. When her mom, Patty, drove the route, she didn't find Tara. What she found were pieces of her daughter's Walkman scattered along the highway. Tara's bike was gone. It looked like someone had pulled her right off the road in broad daylight. Witnesses later said they saw Tara biking that morning with a white pickup truck trailing her too closely. One described the driver as a middle-aged man with reddish-brown hair. The FBI got involved, but nothing turned up, just those broken pieces of her Walkman. Patty later admitted she had stopped riding with Tara weeks earlier because they felt someone was following them. She even told Tara to carry a mace, but Tara laughed it off. Nearly a year later, the case took a chilling turn. In a Florida parking lot, someone found a Polaroid photo of a teenage girl and a young boy, both bound and gagged in the back of a van. The girl looked almost identical to Tara, with the same face, same haircut, even a scar on her leg in the exact spot Tara had one. The film was fresh, manufactured after her disappearance. There was even a rumor about law enforcement protecting their own. In 2008, the county sheriff basically said he knew what happened and who did it, but he wouldn't name names without a body. Tara's family was furious. If you know, why not do something? The whole town wondered the same thing. Fast forward to now, and things might finally be changing. There's been a new task force, new searches, even a new reward from the FBI. In 2023, the sheriff said they finally have enough evidence to bring the case to the district attorney. The details are sealed, but the hope is real for the first time in decades. Her family's still waiting for answers, and maybe, after all these years, they'll finally get them. Cynthia Anderson. In the summer of 1981, 20-year-old Cynthia Anderson was a legal secretary in Toledo, Ohio. She was the kind of worker every boss wants. On time, dependable, and never missed a day. But behind all that, Cindy had been living in fear. For months, she told people she was scared. She'd been getting creepy phone calls. She had nightmares about being abducted. Her bosses even installed a panic button at her desk because she kept asking for more security. On the morning of August 4, Cindy went into the office first. Like always, she let herself in, locked the door, and started her day. By noon, when the lawyers returned from court, the office looked normal. The lights were on, the AC running, but Cindy was gone. Her car was still in the parking lot. Her purse and keys were missing, but on her desk there was a romance novel, open to a scene where a woman is attacked, and her phone hadn't been put on hold, which she always did before stepping out. Even the day before she disappeared, a client saw Cindy take a call, hang up quickly, and look terrified. He said he was so shaken by her reaction, he called the police that same day. Things got even weirder after Cindy disappeared. About a month later, police received 2 separate phone calls from an anonymous woman. She said Cindy was alive, but being held captive in the basement of a white house in North Toledo. She said the property had 2 houses next to each other, both owned by the same family, and that the family's son was keeping Cindy there. Police searched every place that fit the description, but they found nothing. Then you have the law firm drama. Around the time Cindy disappeared, her boss, attorney Richard Neller, and one of his clients were caught up in a drug ring investigation. Some people think Cindy overheard something secret in the office, and someone decided to make sure she'd never talk. There's no public evidence for this, but it's the kind of theory you can't ignore in a case like this. Her parents never gave up, but they died without answers. Decades later, Cindy's case remains one of Ohio's most unsettling mysteries. Phoenix Coldon. On a Sunday afternoon in December 2011, 23-year-old Phoenix Coldon took her car out from her parents' driveway in St. Louis County and drove off. She told her dad she might be heading to the store, maybe visiting a friend, but that was the last time her family saw her. When she didn't come home that night, every call went to voicemail. Of course, her parents grew worried and called the police. What they didn't know was that Phoenix's SUV had already been found miles away in East St. Louis, Illinois. Her SUV was sitting in the middle of St. Clair Avenue, with the engine still running and the driver's door opened. Police assumed it was abandoned and towed it. Inside, everything was still there. Her purse, her glasses, her shoes, even her ID. The keys were still in the ignition, like she just stepped away for a moment, but she never came back. Her phone, bank account, and social media went dark. No calls, no posts, no witnesses. Then, the picture of Phoenix's life got more complicated. She wasn't just the quiet, church-going fencing champ her parents thought. She had a second phone, another Facebook account, and friends who said she wanted more independence, maybe even a different life. But her parents never believed it. They said she had no reason to disappear on purpose, and no matter what, they were sure she wouldn't have left them hanging like that. Another theory is human trafficking. East St. Louis is known for it, and girls have gone missing there before. There were rumors that someone saw a woman matching Phoenix's description with 2 men near where her car was found, but no trace of Phoenix has ever turned up. Cops say they've chased every lead, but nothing stuck. Her family burned through their savings on private detectives, flyers, and searches. They lost their home, but never stopped looking for her. Every year, around Christmas, they remind the world Phoenix is still missing. Tier 5. Sodder Family Burning House. On Christmas Eve, 1945, the Sodder family's house in Fayetteville, West Virginia, catches fire in the middle of the night. George and Jenny Sodder escaped with 4 of their 9 children, but the other 5, Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty, were gone. The official story says they died in the fire, but almost nothing that night makes sense. When the ashes were cleared, there were no bones. Experts told the Sodders that even in the hottest fire, remains don't vanish completely, especially not in less than an hour. Jenny Sodder even did her own tests, burning up bones in the oven, and sure enough, there was always something left. Then there were the strange details. The family's phone line had been cut. Their ladder, which was usually leaning against the house, was missing, and later found tossed into a ditch. When the house was burning, George tried to start his trucks to reach the upstairs windows, but both trucks, which worked fine the day before, suddenly wouldn't start. And the warnings. A man once pointed to their fuse box and said, "This'll cause a fire someday," though their wiring was brand new. Another salesman tried to push George into buying life insurance. When he refused, the man told him, "Your house will go up in smoke, and your kids will be destroyed." George had been outspoken against Mussolini, which made enemies in their Italian immigrant community. The night before the fire, Jenny got a bizarre phone call from a stranger, asking for someone she didn't know. Minutes later, she heard a loud thud on the roof. Soon after, the fire started. Witnesses later claimed they saw the Sodder kids watching the fire from a car, or at a diner the next morning. Nothing was ever proven. George and Jenny begged the FBI for help, but local authorities refused. The couple spent the rest of their lives searching, even putting up a highway billboard with their children's faces. The Sodder children were never found. Their parents died without answers, and decades later, the mystery is still strong. How do 5 children vanish from a burning house, leaving no trace at all? Bobby Dunbar, Doppleganger Kid. Here's a story straight out of a Netflix series. Back in August 1912, 4-year-old Bobby Dunbar went missing during a family fishing trip at Swayze Lake, Louisiana. This disappearance sparked a massive search. The whole town got involved. People blew up parts of the lake, slicing open alligators, and wading through swamps looking for any sign of this blonde, blue-eyed little kid. But nothing. Fast forward 8 months, cops in Mississippi pick up a traveling handyman named William Walters who got a little boy with him. The kid looks a lot like Bobby, even has the same moles and scars. Everyone's overjoyed. Police say Bobby's been found, and the Dunbars race to Mississippi. Hugs, tears, newspapers went viral. It's the kind of story people wanted. Lost boy found, family reunited. Roll credits, right? Not even close. Right away, people start asking questions. Walter insists the boy isn't Bobby at all, but Bruce Anderson, the son of a single mom named Julia Anderson who'd left her boy in his care. Julia shows up to claim her son, but it's a mess. The Dunbars are positive it's Bobby. Julia is sure it's Bruce. Initially, even the Dunbars have doubts. The boy doesn't recognize his supposed mother, Leslie, and seems uncomfortable when called Bobby. But the next day, after bathing him, Leslie points to his birthmarks and declares she's certain he's her son. There's a custody showdown in court. Front page news all over the South. Julia, who barely has any money, is basically set up to lose. At one point, they make her pick out her child from a lineup of similar boys. She can't do it right away, but keep in mind that she hadn't seen her son in over a year. In the end, the court sides with the Dunbars. Walters is tried for kidnapping, convicted, and sent to prison. Even though the witnesses testified the boy was with Walters before Bobby disappeared, Walters serves 2 years before his conviction is overturned and nobody retries him. The kid grows up as Bobby Dunbar in Louisiana. He married, has kids, and lives his whole life as Bobby. Julia moves on and starts another family, but never stops saying her boy was taken from her. Then comes the plot twist. In 2004, a Dunbar granddaughter, Margaret Cutright, decides to finally get answers and does a DNA test. And as you may guess, it turns out Julia, the single mom, was right all along. The DNA says he was almost certainly Bruce Anderson. The Dunbars accidentally ended up raising another family's kid for his whole life. The Andersons finally get closure, but the Dunbars are blindsided. Imagine finding out your granddad was never who you thought. The courts, the townspeople, the media, everybody got it wrong. All because, back then, they had no way to check DNA except for, does he look like him? And who seems more respectable? What actually happened to Bobby Dunbar? Most people think he drowned or got taken by a gator right after he vanished. They looked for remains, but nothing ever turned up. Margaret Cutright, the granddaughter, thinks that's the most likely answer. He slipped away and was lost for good. Remote island lighthouse keepers. It's December 1900 on a remote islet off the coast of Scotland called the Flannan Isles. There's a new lighthouse, and it's run by 3 guys. This place is so remote, even sheep look at you like you're nuts for being there. One day, the relief crew pulls up on their supply boat, expecting to swap shifts and have a warm cup of tea with the keepers. But when they get there, the lighthouse was pitch dark. This is a big deal. It's supposed to warn ships off the rocks. Nobody's answering the horn. And when the relief keeper, Joseph Moore, goes inside, the whole place feels weird. No sign of the guys. The beds were unmade. A chair knocked over. Some say there was a half-eaten meal still on the table. But honestly, that's probably just a spooky add-on, because the official records don't mention it. Still, you get the picture. The place looks like the men dropped everything and left in a hurry. It gets stranger. The heavy weather gear was still hanging on the hook for one of them. That's the sort of thing you never forget out here. If you go without it, you're asking for trouble. Down at the landing, it's even more of a mess. Box of supplies busted open. Railings bent. Sod ripped up by the sea. Whatever hit this place, it hit hard. The only clue in the logbook is the usual weather stuff. None of it is supernatural or dangerous stuff. So what happened? The official theory is a massive wave hit the island. Maybe 2 of the keepers went down to tie up supplies or check the landing after the storm. And the 3rd ran out to help, possibly without his coat. A rogue wave comes out of nowhere, slams the landing, and sweeps all 3 men into the ocean. The sea out there is brutal. The waves can hit 100 feet. If that happened, there'd be nothing left. And that's what the records suggest. But no bodies or their gear ever washed up. That set people's imaginations on fire. Maybe it was madness, pirates, or a Cthulhu attack? The island has a weird reputation for curses and ghosts. Some folks even joke about aliens, but let's be real. When 3 people disappear into thin air, every wild idea gets a shot. The Bennington Triangle. There's this stretch of woods in southern Vermont folks call the Bennington Triangle. Between 1945 and 1950, 5 people went missing in that area, and not a single one was ever really explained. The whole thing kicked off with an old hunting guide named Mitty Rivers. He was 74 and knew those woods better than anybody. One day, he's leading a group through the trails and he gets a little ahead. Next thing, he's just gone. The only thing they ever found was a single rifle cartridge dropped by a stream. No tracks, no body. People searched for days, but it was like he'd vanished into thin air. Not even a year later, a college girl named Paula Weldon decided to go for a hike on the long trail. She was 18 years old, smart, wearing this bright red jacket that should have been easy to spot for miles. Lots of folks saw her heading up the trail, but that was it. She never came back. The search was huge, probably the biggest the state had ever seen, with police, volunteers, even the FBI poking around. But they never found so much as a shoelace. The whole thing was so strange that Vermont actually created the state police after that, just because they realized they needed to be ready for something like this. After Paula, things just kept getting weirder. There was an old vet named James Tedford who just straight up disappeared off a moving bus. People remembered seeing him on the ride, but when the bus pulled into Bennington, he was gone. His suitcase was still sitting right there, but the man just wasn't anywhere. It's like the world glitched and erased him. Then came the story of Paul Jepson, a little kid, 8 years old, who was with his mom at the town dump. She left him in the truck for just a couple of minutes, and when she came back, he was gone. He was wearing a bright red jacket too. Bloodhounds followed his scent to a stretch of highway and then lost it completely. Like maybe he got picked up by a passing car. No one saw anything. No sign of him ever turned up. Finally, there was Frida Langer. She was out hiking with her cousin, slipped and got soaked in a stream. So she said she'd run back to camp to change her clothes. She never made it back. That one's different because they did eventually find her body months later, after the snow melted, in a spot they'd already searched. There was no way to tell how she died, and the whole thing just added to the sense that this patch of Vermont is seriously cursed. People around Bennington started talking about patterns, how 2 of the missing were wearing red, how a lot of these cases happen in the fall, most in the late afternoon. Some folks say it's all just coincidence, just bad luck and bad weather. Others whisper like maybe there's a killer hiding in those woods, or maybe something even stranger. Old-timers talk about a wild man, a Bennington monster that snatches people. Some blame aliens or portals or who knows what else. Every weird theory's been thrown out there. The thing is, none of these cases ever got solved, and just kind of faded into local legend. Hikers still go out there, and every once in a while, someone will say the woods feel off, like you're being watched. But maybe that's just because everyone grows up hearing these stories. and even now, the Bennington Triangle is just as much a mystery as ever. Jim Sullivan. You heard that right. Jim Sullivan was a California singer-songwriter. In 1969, he put out this album called UFO, and if you play it now, it's got that wandering, echoey sound, all highways and lonesome sky. And yeah, some pretty trippy alien references. The lyrics are full of vanishing, leaving, out there stuff. But the album flops. Jim keeps playing bars, gets a second record deal. That one goes nowhere too. He's married, has a kid. But by 1975, nothing's working. So he packs up his guitar, some clothes, a box of unsold records, and heads for Nashville like hundreds of musicians before him, hoping for a break. He never makes it. Somewhere outside Santa Rosa, New Mexico, Jim checks into the La Mesa Hotel, drops the key inside the room without ever sleeping there, and keeps driving. The next day, his car is found abandoned 26 miles away at a remote ranch owned by the Gennady family, with the doors unlocked, with his wallet and all his stuff still inside. Ranch workers recall seeing him, seeming confused, asking about a phone, declined help, and then walking off into the desert. That's the last anyone ever saw of Jim Sullivan. Cops looked everywhere. They brought in helicopters, searched all over. No footprints, no body, no sign of his guitar beyond what was in the car. Some think he got disoriented and died of exposure. It happens in the desert, especially if you're exhausted or a bit out of it. Others think maybe he met someone who meant him harm. New Mexico in the 70s had its share of rough characters, and the ranch was rumored to have ties to those types. There's always the theory that he just walked away, started a new life, but that never really fit. He loved his family, and you don't vanish with your wallet still in your car if you're planning a fresh start. Of course, there's the alien theory. The guy writes a whole record about UFOs and then vanishes on a stretch of New Mexico desert near Roswell. And Roswell is famous for weird lights and UFO lore. Even his own lyrics talk about being taken by UFOs, so it's hard not to wonder if the mothership called him home. But at the heart of it, Jim Sullivan is still just a missing person. A guy who chased a dream across the desert and never made it home. His wife and son never found out what happened. So that's the iceberg. Maybe some of these stories will be solved one day. Maybe they never will. See you in the next one.